And welcome back to Bengal Bites, real, raw, unfiltered talk about the Cincinnati Bengals and the NFL. I'm your host, Derek. As a reminder, this podcast is not sponsored by anyone or anything. I am not affiliated with the Cincinnati Bengals whatsoever. I'm just a regular fan who's making a podcast for you, the listener, to enjoy for free. I know it's an amazing deal, but act now. Supplies are limited. This is episode 5. I think I'm going to title this one Finely Tuned Anxiety. We are through the preseason. Preseason is completed. This is officially the first week of the NFL regular season. Football is finally back. You can taste it. You can smell it in the air. Things are just a little bit different. The grass is a little bit browner. It's really been dry here lately. But we've waited so long since the end of last season, the AFC Championship game. Feels like it's been forever. It's only been 7 months. We've only got a few more days to go, but the waiting is the hardest part, as they say. So we've also been waiting on Joe Burrow's contract. As we know, that still hasn't been completed for whatever reason. That's another thing that's making the anxiety build. But if you're completely new to this show, go back and check out episode 0, where I explain more details about who I am, what this show is all about, why I'm making this podcast. In the last episode, episode 4, we did a complete recap and breakdown of the third and final preseason game where the Bengals played the Washington Commanders in a loss 21-19. We didn't see any starters. We just saw most of the backups and the backups to the backups. We also did 48 roster locks, or people who I thought were for sure going to make the roster going into the final 53 cutdown. In this episode, we're going to review how I did on my 48 roster locks compared to what the actual Bengals 53-man roster is going to be, and what changes they made in terms of waiver wire pickups. We'll also talk about what to look for as we head into week 1 of the regular season, and some more reflections on the preseason and the offseason in general. And I wanted to touch on the From the Jungle episode 1 production from the Bengals they put out on YouTube last week, and it's also going to be on TV, I think on Bally Sports or something. But we've got a lot of things to cover in this episode, so let's get right to it. Now, after we recorded last week's episode, the biggest story of training camp by far was the fact that Joe Burrow had returned to practice since straining his right calf in the first training camp practice, basically. So we got some clips of Joe Burrow on the practice field, walking out to practice, tossing, just kind of standing in place, doing some light throwing, but they said he looked good. All the receivers said, oh, Joe Burrow's back. He was throwing dimes to Charlie Jones. Everybody said that it looked like Shiesty was back. So it seemed like nothing to be concerned about, or maybe he was going to be good for week 1. But of course, Zach Taylor stuck with his typical not say anything. We've got a plan in place and he's making good progress and we're just taking it day by day. We'll see how it goes. You know how Zach Taylor is. But there had been whispers prior to his return. It was actually the day before he came back to practice. They were asking, does Joe Burrow's contract situation have anything to do with his practice availability? As in, is the fact that Joe Burrow still hasn't signed a contract extension with 2 years remaining on his rookie deal, since the Bengals did pick up his 5th-year option. He's going into year 4. But if you look around the league, Jalen Hurts signed his contract extension. He was in Joe Burrow's draft class and drafted way later than he was. Justin Herbert signed his contract extension in the offseason. Joe Burrow has acknowledged that he, his agent, and the team and everyone has been working together to negotiate out a deal that's best for everyone involved. Now, we as fans are not involved in this negotiation at all. We're not involved. When he says what's best for everyone, that doesn't include the fans. So we need to take ourselves out of the equation and just be casual observers, as much as we want to get involved and be super nervous about Joe Burrow's contract and this and that and what the team should do and what Joe Burrow should do and whether he should sit out or whether he should take a team-friendly deal or whatever you think. As fans, we just have to remember whatever happens with Joe Burrow's contract, it doesn't affect us either way other than the fact that we want to see Joe Burrow perform at the highest level possible. And as fans, we're thinking, okay, if Joe Burrow doesn't have the contract and his financial security, we don't want him playing scared because you don't want him in the back of his mind saying, I can't get hurt, otherwise it's going to cost me tons of money. You don't want anybody to have any doubts about what they're doing on the football field. You want to be totally confident. And everybody around the league knows that Joe Burrow has earned the contract extension that exceeds Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and all these players. Even though they're great, Joe Burrow is greater and he deserves more. He deserves better. There's a lot of narratives from the team out there, like Mike Brown talking about, oh, there's only so much pie and the pigs at the trough are so, he likes to portray players as being greedy pigs who are just trying to take all the salary cap for themselves. Joe Burrow is not greedy. Joe Burrow just should get what he deserves, which is being the highest paid player in the league. He's the highest attention grabber. All the media want Joe Burrow, and that's why he's smart to withhold his services. Throughout training camp, you didn't see Joe Burrow in front of any cameras. Joe Burrow wasn't doing any interviews, talking to any of the national reporters. They all came around on their training camp tours, and just like last year, they interviewed Jamar Chase and DJ Reader and all the other important players. Joe Burrow wasn't anywhere to be found. And now that we're getting closer and closer to the actual start of the regular season, this is where people start to get nervous because all summer, these reporters have been saying, oh, it's no big deal, nothing to worry about, it'll get done. And then July training camp opened up. They say, oh, the Bengals, they usually do it first, second week of training camp. It's right around the corner. And then nothing happened. Well, Joe Burrow is just waiting for Justin Herbert to sign his contract. And then nothing happened after Herbert signed his contract. Now we're all the way to the regular season. Time is running out, but we see around the league a lot of other players are in similar type of situations. Like Nick Bosa is kind of a hold in. Justin Jefferson, who is Joe Burrow's teammate at LSU, the wide receiver who now plays for the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of people would call Justin Jefferson one of the top, if not the top wide receiver in the league. And he has not held out from training camp, has not held out or missed any practices for the Vikings at all. And he's looking for an extension too. So there's a lot of guys who are playing this contract extension situation in a lot of different ways. Chris Jones for the Chiefs, they're getting ready to play the opening game on Thursday night. He hasn't even reported to the team yet because he wants a better contract. And he's said he's willing to sit out until week 8, which if he comes back before week 8, then this year of his contract counts and he becomes a free agent at the end of the year and he would be free to sign with any other team. So he doesn't want to completely sit out because the Chiefs would still own his rights as a player basically, and he wouldn't be able to sign with any other team with a better deal. But all these players, they're trying to get the best deal possible before the season starts because then that money becomes guaranteed. As a player, if you go through the season playing out your original contract, you're taking on a lot of risk. That's what Lamar Jackson took the chance of doing when he was with the Ravens. He played out his original rookie contract, even though he was the last pick in the first round. He was only making like $1.5 million. I say only $1.5 million, but I mean, when you consider the fact that starting quarterbacks in the league are making upwards of 40, and now Lamar is making over $50 million a year, and he was making $1 million. It's like, why would you risk it? Because knock on wood, catastrophic injury could happen at any point that could end your career completely and you could never play again. So this year, Joe Burrow is supposed to make about $4.5 million, which of course is a ton of money for me and you and most people in the world. But when you consider that if Joe Burrow signed a contract extension, he would be making at least 10 times more money than he would be making this year. So, I mean, if I'm Joe Burrow, it's like if I'm up for a 10 times amount raise, but I wouldn't get it if I got hurt, it's like, man, I don't know. My calf still feels kind of hurt right now. It would feel a lot better if I had millions and millions of dollars to rub on it. But one thing, Joe Burrow has said that he really admires Kirk Cousins. As he said, Joe Burrow said that he thinks Kirk Cousins is one of the most underrated players in the league. But maybe he also looks at the way Kirk Cousins handled his contract situation when he got drafted by the Washington franchise. And he didn't sign a contract extension. They franchise tagged him. And then he eventually went to Minnesota and got a huge, fully guaranteed contract. Joe Burrow could be holding out for whatever he needs. We don't know what that is necessarily. He hasn't laid out exactly what it is, but the only reason that Joe Burrow hasn't signed a contract yet is because the Bengals haven't made him a good enough offer. There's nothing else to it beyond that. People who want to say, oh, they're just working out the details. The only details that's important are whatever Joe Burrow asked for, and if that's not what they've offered, then it's not good enough. I think everybody has to accept the fact that Joe Burrow is this franchise. This franchise would not be where it is today. It would not have the fan base that it does. It would not have the appeal that it does without Joe Burrow. I know there are a lot of Andy Dalton apologists out there. I am not one of them. I don't miss Andy Dalton at all. So long and good luck, Andy Dalton. It was nice knowing you. But he did not get any wins. He was constantly underachieving. I couldn't wait for us to get rid of Andy Dalton. Joe Burrow is it. We need Joe Burrow, okay? We need a happy, healthy, contractually obligated for the next decade Joe Burrow on the Cincinnati Bengals. I was thinking about doing this podcast a month prior to when I actually started, but it was literally the day that Joe Burrow hurt his calf. I was going to record. I was all pumped up. I was like, yeah, training camp, here we go. Let's start it off with a podcast. And then Joe Burrow hurt his calf. I was like, maybe not today. Maybe I'll put that podcast off because without Joe Burrow, all of my enthusiasm was just sapped out of my body. I felt depressed for almost, I don't want to say a week, but it was like a good couple days where it was just like a depression of like, oh no, Joe Burrow's calf is injured on the first day of training camp. Season's over already. This can't be happening. Oh no. It's just a panic and anxiety was setting in. So I didn't know what to do. I can't start a podcast like that. That's no way to start a podcast of like, oh my sweet Jesus. That's not a good way to start off the podcast. So I chill out for a month or two, came back, started the podcast, but still, I really need Joe Burrow to sign that contract for me to feel fully on board with what the Bengals are trying to do. And I swear, I'm going to try to be more enthusiastic and positive and fun-loving about this franchise and this team and this season as it goes forward. But it's just, as a fanatic, it is hard when there's no Joe Burrow. It's like, man. All right, enough on Joe Burrow for right now. We'll get more information. Actually, what am I talking about? We're not going to get any more information from Zach Taylor ever. He had a press conference today, Monday, Labor Day, and he said absolutely nothing as usual. He said everybody was day-to-day. Joseph Osai, day-to-day. Joe Burrow, day-to-day. Chidobe Awuzie, day-to-day as well. So you and me also, day-to-day, if you didn't know. Zach Taylor, day-to-day. He pretty much is doing like the Kyle Shanahan of nobody is guaranteed to live today or tomorrow. So we'll see if, we may all die. We'll see what happens. The Bengals did announce their captains for the 2023 season, not at the press conference, but on Twitter. and on their app. The captains for 2023 are Joe Burrow, number 9, the quarterback, number 98, nose tackle DJ Reader, number 94, defensive end Sam Hubbard, number 64, center Ted Karras, number 28, running back Joe Mixon, and number 21, cornerback Mike Hilton. Those are all 6 great players, great representatives, ambassadors for the franchise. Speaking of great ambassadors, even though he was not named a captain on this year's team, we did see on Twitter going around a clip of T. Higgins. He had been at a fan event, meet and greet, taking pictures with fans, and apparently when the event ended, he went to leave and went outside and saw how many people were still standing in line, like around the sidewalk. So he immediately reacted and went straight back inside to finish meeting all the rest of the people. So that was nice to see him taking time to, stay and meet all the fans who had come and wait in line with his jersey on to get his autograph and talk to him and take a picture with him. As a fan of the team, you feel good seeing your players show love back to the fan base when they see so many people out there to meet and support them. They want to show some of that appreciation back, so that's good to see. We also learned in this that number 22 cornerback Chidobe Awuzie would play in Week 1 against the Browns. So that was kind of up in the air whether Chido, who's coming back from an ACL injury that he suffered last year against the Browns, also in Cleveland, guarding his old nemesis and friend Amari Cooper, who's a wide receiver for the Browns. So this is a good sign for the Bengals defense. They're going to get one of their best players from last year back. When Cheetah went down, Cam Taylor-Britt came in, and he was good enough that they basically let Eli Apple go and said Cam Taylor-Britt was good enough to be his replacement starting this year. So that was good. They drafted DJ Turner, who's a rookie out of Michigan. But as we said, it's not the best to have a rookie cornerback starting in Week 1 in the NFL. They're going to have a tendency to get burned, maybe have some confidence issues. So it's going to be a lot better to have Cheeto, a seasoned veteran out there who's gone against pros for years and years. I think if Cheeto can stay healthy and play the entire season, maybe get a few picks and the Bengals continue their success, he could get Pro Bowl consideration because he was playing at a Pro Bowl level 2 years ago and just didn't get enough interceptions and enough big plays, but he was a big reason why they went to the Super Bowl. He was locking down all the team's best receiver. On the other side of the coin for the Cleveland Browns, we heard that number 21 cornerback Denzel Ward, Ohio State alumni, was not able to practice on Monday. He suffered a concussion in the final preseason game, Week 3 for the Browns, and was out and hasn't practiced since then. So that's something to watch as we go forward into the game. They've got like 6 more days until the actual game. So he's got time to come back out of the concussion protocol, start practicing. The real practices start Wednesday. They go Wednesday, Thursday, harder practices. Friday is more of a lighter day. And then they travel or they just have a day of walkthroughs on Saturday before the game on Sunday. Otherwise, I think the Browns are pretty healthy as a roster overall. As I mentioned on the last episode, I gave my 48 roster locks, or people who I would be very surprised if they didn't make it onto the 53-man roster. And somewhat not surprisingly, I got 47 out of 48 players correct. So the only one that I got incorrect in terms of somebody that I locked who didn't make the 53-man roster was my boy Raymond Johnson III, number 56. He was wreaking havoc in the offensive backfields all preseason, getting sacks, batting passes, pressures on quarterbacks, tackling running backs out of the backfield. He was making plays all over the place. Raymond ended up going unclaimed through waivers. That's one of the things you hear about every season is people say, oh, well, if they don't put him on the roster, there's no way he's going to make it through waivers. Some team is going to claim him and put him on their roster. And of course, that rarely happens. So pretty much all of the Bengals players that they ended up waiving made it through the roster. And this happens with most other teams too, not just the Bengals. But what happens is after they waive the players, then the people that they actually want to bring back on the practice squad, unless they're a vested veteran, they have to pass through waivers. But if they don't, then they can just come back with their original team. So we saw almost all the people on the Bengals practice squad were people who had been in training camp on the initial 90-man roster and had been with the team for the last several months to learn the whole system and know how everything works already. Unfortunately for Raymond, the Bengals defensive line is just very deep at the moment. We've got a lot of talent there. So even though they kept 10 on the roster, Raymond decided to join the Lions practice squad instead of the Bengals. So he may see that as a better opportunity to get onto the active roster of a team as opposed to the Bengals, where the other thing was the Bengals kept all of their draft picks from this year and the previous season. They didn't let any of their draft picks go. So Raymond was an undrafted free agent. He may have seen himself as being kind of the low man on the totem pole within the franchise because he wasn't a draft pick. He didn't have that kind of pedigree, and maybe he felt like he was being slighted. So who knows what the situation was with Raymond, why he went to the Lions, but that was too bad that he got away. You want to see good players who make plays, stay on the team, stay with the organization. Besides Raymond Johnson III, kind of just a few of the other misses I had in terms of, players who I did not lock who made the team. I didn't lock Cody Ford, the guard, number 61. He has not looked good in the preseason, but he's a big guy, so he needs some backup meat. Also, on the defensive trenches, number 97, J2 Fele. He's a defensive tackle. He played pretty well in the preseason, and he's got experience with the team, so I kind of forgot about him. Number 38, DJ Ivy. I mentioned him a number of times. I just forgot to put him on the list. And what I should have said was, I thought all of the draft picks from this year were going to make the team. I didn't see any of the draft picks getting cut. So DJ Ivy was the 7th round draft pick. He was going to make the team. I just forgot him. Number 35, Jalen Davis, is the backup slot cornerback. So I forgot about him. He's basically the Mike Hilton backup. So even though Mike Hilton isn't necessarily a starter, every down starter, they need a backup Mike Hilton. And then one that was a little bit of a surprise for me was number 32, running back Travion Williams. Travion has been hurt again all of training camp. We haven't seen anything in the preseason in terms of preseason playing from Travion. So I wasn't sure because Travion, this is like the second or third training camp in a row that he's missed. He's missed multiple games with hamstring issues, ankle problems, different soft tissue injuries. So it's been a battle ever since Travion got drafted back in 2019 in the 6th round. It's a long time to hang on to a guy who hasn't really done much with the franchise. So I hope Travion all the best, but I was just surprised because of his lack of productivity so far. One of the bright spots in the roster changes is we got rid of Trevor Siemian as the backup quarterback. I would venture to guess that Trevor Siemian's career in the NFL is over. After he got beat out by Jake Browning for the backup Bengals quarterback position. And it was like a bad competition. So I can't see any other team really wanting to bring in Trevor Siemian. They got a good look and it wasn't good. So the Bengals instead picked up Will Grier, who was the quarterback who basically got replaced by Trey Lance at Dallas with the Cowboys. So what happened? Trey Lance, who is a high draft pick by the 49ers, a few seasons ago, traded like 2 first-round draft picks to move up to get Trey Lance, and then he turned out to be a complete bust so far at quarterback. So they traded Trey Lance, the 49ers traded Trey Lance to the Cowboys last week for a 4th-round draft pick. So that took Dallas to having 4 quarterbacks on their roster at least. So they had this extra Will Grier quarterback, basically. He went out and played in the final preseason game for Dallas even though he knew that he was going to be released the next day. They even told him, they're like, yeah, we're going to release you, but here's your opportunity to go out and audition basically for the rest of the league. And he went out and he was 28 of 35. I think he had about 305 yards and a few touchdowns. So a good performance. It was very efficient. He wasn't throwing the ball downfield, laser cannon arm. Like, it was very dink and dunk, West Coast, check downs. But that's what Zach Taylor loves. And he just loves somebody to come in, execute the offense, don't have a strong arm, just throw it to the guy out in the flat or whatever. So if Will Grier can do all those things, he may eventually become the backup quarterback sooner rather than later. Everything he showed in that final preseason game was better than the Bengals backup quarterbacks all preseason. So if he can play like that on a regular basis, backup job is his. The Bengals also picked up running back Demetric Felton, who was a former draft pick of the Browns a couple seasons ago. Has not really done too much either. He's kind of a smaller guy. He's kind of a converted wide receiver. So he's only about 5'9", 185 pounds. Not the type of guy who's going to be able to run up the middle, but maybe as a third down type of catching passes out of the backfield type guy, he could be effective at that. Just more depth in the running back field. We don't have a lot of experience back there still. Other than those two moves, the Bengals didn't really pick up anybody new off of the waiver wire. They still have a open position left on their practice squad. They have 15 out of the 16 available spots filled on their practice squad. And all of the draft picks made it. None of the undrafted free agents made it. Part of that is due to the fact that, yes, the Bengals have a strong, deep roster that took them to 2 straight AFC championship games and the Super Bowl 2 years ago. But also, they didn't spend very much money. They were one of the lowest spending teams on undrafted free agent guarantees, which isn't a huge amount. Like, the highest spending team was about $1.2 million, which was the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bengals only spent $120,000 on their undrafted free agents. So the Chiefs spent 10 times more money on their undrafted free agents. And not surprisingly, some of the Chiefs' undrafted free agents, or UDFAs it's called for short, so I don't have to keep saying that. Some of the Chiefs' UDFAs made the team. Some of the Browns' UDFAs made the team. Packers' UDFAs have for a long time made the team consecutive years. So some teams make it a part of their philosophy to get these undrafted free agents into the building, and they prioritize them. Other teams prioritize draft picks, so we'll have to see how it works out for the Bengals. Of course, I would always want to see greater levels of competition, pushing guys, even if they are draft picks, even if they are starters and veterans for a long time. You want to have the highest level of competition, even from the guys who are at the lowest end, the third and fourth string guys. You want those guys to be good. You don't want to just bring in a bunch of slappies, a bunch of bums off the street who, what's the point of that? Like, I would rather, have the highest level of competition at all times. So we'll have to see how these draft picks turn out. But since they're bringing back so much talent from the teams that we knew were good, you feel pretty good that as long as everybody didn't get like advanced aging syndrome in the offseason, everybody, they're 1 year older. Maybe that's good in some guys' cases, maybe a little bit not so good in other guys' cases who are getting towards the end of their career. But Bengals have one of the youngest rosters in the NFL. They're the third youngest team in the NFL. They're only about 25 and a half years old on average. And part of that, or a lot of that, has to do with the fact that they switched their special teams punter and long snapper. So Kevin Huber, the punter, was there he played in more Bengals games than any other player in history. So he was there for obviously a long time, and he was 39, I want to say. And then Clark Harris, the long snapper, also did not return. I don't think Clark has officially retired yet, but I don't think he's on an active roster either. So it's kind of one of those things where he's retired by default just by the fact that nobody has picked him up onto their team yet. So unfortunately, Clark tore his bicep halfway through the year last year and got replaced by Cal Adamitis, the rookie out of Pitt. since that point, Cal's pretty much taken his spot and run with it. So we've got a rookie punter, a second-year long snapper. A lot of guys on the team are new or within their first 2 or 3 years. So hopefully that pays dividends this year and in years to come. I know we also lost Von Bell and Jesse Bates, two of the linchpins on the defense, and we also lost Hayden Hurst, who is experienced tight end. So losing some experience, but hopefully gaining more speed and athleticism in some of those positions. It's very difficult to judge what this team is going to be going into the regular season, just because we have not seen the starters play in a live action preseason game at all. Like, none of the offensive starters played at all, except for Jonah Williams, like one series at right tackle just to kind of get the hang of it. The defensive starters only played one series, so we barely saw anything from them. It's almost impossible to get a feel for what this team is going to be or how good are they going to be. And that's kind of by design. Going into the preseason, like we said, you don't want to show your cards to the other teams too early. So if you're going to be really good, it's not necessarily an advantage to go into the season proclaiming and announcing to everybody how good you are. You might want to kind of set expectations a little bit lower, catch people by surprise. Like, oh, I didn't know they were that good. And then they beat us. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this Battle of Ohio this weekend. This is the first, I'll say, real football. We did see a little bit of college football last weekend, which is nice, but some of those games, it's like 81-3, 77-7. It's like, is that really interesting for anybody to watch? Well, I don't understand. Why do these teams do this? Like, I guess, it's like a preseason game for college, but some of these games are ridiculous. We did see TCU lose to Colorado and Coach Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, in his debut. Around here, everybody cares about Ohio State Buckeyes. They beat Indiana just based on the strength of Ohio State's defense. Like, they just suffocated Indiana, strangled them into submission. They couldn't do anything. I think Indiana only had like 150 yards of total offense in the whole game, and they only scored 3 points. So Ohio State didn't really look that good either, but they were able to score, a few field goals. I think their quarterback had like 0 touchdown passes and an interception. And I saw him on the goal line. He had the blocking all set up to run straight into the end zone, and he ran the complete wrong direction straight into the Indiana defender and got tackled short of the goal line, so they had to settle for a field goal. It's like, I don't know about this Ohio State quarterback, guys. Kyle McCord, we got any backups over here? Or who we got on deck? Just, asking for a friend. But yeah, I don't watch too much college football. I saw, what was it? FSU, Florida State beat LSU. So that was interesting. But actually, I didn't see that because it was on ESPN. And you know what? I don't know if anybody out there has Spectrum, Charter, but they're in this dispute with ESPN and Walt Disney, where ESPN, all the ESPN networks, all the Disney networks got pulled off of Spectrum Cable. So even the streaming, like, I thought maybe, streaming, they could still do that, but like not even a replay, no on demand. Like if I go to ESPN.com, I'm just blocked. It's like, man, you guys are shutting it down hardcore. So that's going to be an interesting contract dispute to watch. If this goes into the NFL season, you're going to get a whole lot of people being upset about that. But I mean, there's really no good time to take away ESPN off of cable. ESPN is really cable. If you're a man age 18 to 44, like if you, check into let's say it's 30 years ago and you're checking into a Holiday Inn and they say they have cable, you're expecting ESPN. If some hotel says we've got cable but not ESPN, it's like, well, what is going on here? This isn't really cable. Now in this, of course, the customer, the little guy, is caught in the middle. We just want to watch ESPN, watch our favorite sports, but we're not able to because these two major corporations are having a contract dispute and they're not able to negotiate the terms that they both can agree that are fair for each party. In a lot of ways, I see that in NFL player contracts dispute, where the team is offering one thing, the player says that's not enough for my services, and then they can withhold services just like Disney can withhold ESPN from Spectrum. To be honest, I think that's what Joe Burrow should be doing, and I think that's what Lamar Jackson should have done. Lamar Jackson, I think, is very fortunate that he was able to sign a long-term contract extension this offseason, even though he got injured last offseason and didn't play in the playoff game. That's the thing that Bengals fans absolutely don't want to see, is a situation where Joe Burrow could possibly play but doesn't want to risk an injury because of what it could cost him in the long run. You want Joe Burrow to be financially taken care of so that Joe Burrow can go out there and play to the best of his ability without anything lingering in the back of his mind about, oh no, what's going to happen to my money if I get hurt? You can't play like that. People say it's for the love of the game or whatever. Maybe they haven't played football before, but as Logan Wilson said when he was signing his contract extension, football is a game about pain. There's no football player who doesn't know the pain of playing football. People who don't play, people who have never played, haven't experienced the pain, don't know what it's like. But if you've played the game, you understand that when you're signing up to play another season of football, you're signing yourself up to put your body through physical torture and punishment and pain. Physical, psychological, mental pain that you have to do year in, year out. It's amazing what Tom Brady was able to do for so long, knowing that he was going to put his body through that. Same thing for these players. If you're going to sign up for a year of physical abuse, you should be compensated well for it, and you should know that you're going to be compensated fairly. When I look at a situation with Joe Burrow, yes, he was the number 1 overall draft pick, and he's going to make lots of money in the next 2 years based off of that. But he's still underpaid compared to the market. And if you're a starting NFL quarterback, you are an ultra-competitive psycho. You do not want anybody to beat you at anything. Pool, bowling, ping pong, golf, doesn't matter what it is, you want to win. And that comes to getting paid too. Joe Burrow was the number 1 overall pick, and in his mind, he is competing with Justin Herbert, like I said. Those are the 2 big guys in their draft class. Justin Herbert already got his contract. He already got taken care of, got his full... Now, he didn't get full guaranteed like Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, which was outside of the norm, but he got number of years guaranteed. It depends on, some of these deals vest as the years go by, so it's like the first 3 years are guaranteed at signing, and then additional years get guaranteed as he continues to play. But practically, he's guaranteed for almost $200 million at a rate of over $50 million per year. Deshaun Watson for the Cleveland Browns has a fully guaranteed contract. He's making around $50 million per season. So if you look about it from that way, Joe Burrow, when he gets ready to play the Browns, at his salary he's making this year, compared to Deshaun Watson with the Browns, Joe Burrow is going to be playing the same game, the same position, on the same field, but one player is effectively going to be making 10 times more than the other one, and Joe Burrow is going to be the one on the losing end of that. So if you're Joe Burrow or anybody who's in that situation, if you're at your job, you're doing the same job as the guy standing next to you, but you know that that guy is making 10 times more than you do, you're going to have a serious problem with that. We'll see. T. Higgins is still out there. He has 1 year remaining on his rookie contract. Since T was not a first-round pick, they don't have a 5th-year option to extend him. So this is going to be the last year of T's rookie deal. He's going to be a free agent after this, and it's going to be interesting to see if they are able to sign him to an extension or if he gets franchise tagged or what. T. Higgins has the same agent as Jesse Bates III, David Mulligetta, who's known to be someone who's tough to negotiate with. The Bengals weren't able to get a deal done with Jesse Bates. He got franchise tagged, and then he signed with the Atlanta Falcons the year after that. So we'll have to see if the same thing happens with T. Higgins. We would like to see him stay in Cincinnati and be part of that receiving core with Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Tyler Boyd for as long as possible since they've been having success. But from a financial aspect, I don't know if the Bengals are going to be able to pay T and Joe Burrow what both of them are looking for. And they don't have the same agent. So each one of those players is going to be getting or trying to get as much money as possible, independent of the other one's deal. It would be nice if you could get both of them, but they have to look out for each other. And the agents in this situation, they have to get the best deal for their players too. It's their obligation, their duty to do their job. The players play football, the agents negotiate the salary because the agents get paid the percentage. But also, if you're the agent, you don't want to accept a deal that's not worth what your player is valued at because you have more than one client. You have more than one customer. So if you get a reputation of being a pushover with other teams, like, oh, this agent doesn't get his players good deals, he doesn't get good contracts. If Joe Burrow signs a contract that a couple years from now, he's still way underpaid compared to all the rest of the quarterbacks in the league, everybody's going to say, what is this agent doing? He's not doing his job properly. Joe Burrow should get a new agent. And other players are not going to want to hire that agent for themselves. They're going to say, oh, you screwed Joe Burrow on his contract. I'm not hiring you. Now, the biggest story of last week was undoubtedly Joe Burrow returning to the practice field, running around, getting out there back with the teammates. And everybody said how much more energy they felt, getting the starting quarterback out there back on the field with everybody. Everybody just had a little bit more pep in their step, a little bit more focus. So that was good to see. Since this was such a big news story, it actually overshadowed the debut of the Bengals From the Jungle video series. Now, if you listen to one of the people on the Bengals payroll, they will tell you that this From the Jungle is the Bengals version of Hard Knocks, which is only true in the sense that both of them are essentially advertising, and both of them are done in somewhat of a documentary style. I'll give the Bengals media content creation staff all the credit in the world because they do, I think, a great job for what they have to work with, but they have limited resources. So it's not going to be on the scale of HBO and NFL films and the Hard Knocks, the music, the audio, the cameras, everything is just to another level for Hard Knocks. So I think it's almost doing the Bengals a disservice trying to compare themselves to that. But that's what so many other teams have done. And so for a little bit more context, the Bengals aren't the first team, of course, to do their own quote-unquote version of Hard Knocks. The New York Jets have had this for a long time. I think it's called this season it's 2023, so it's like Flight 23. Last year was Flight 22 or something like that, where they just follow the team every year. And it's not, they don't curse, they don't show anything controversial. The team has to approve and sign off on everything, even more so than on Hard Knocks. Like on Hard Knocks, the team has final say about what gets aired, but they're not producing the show themselves. With these in-house productions, the team has complete creative control over exactly what they want to show and what they don't want to show. So it's very filtered. Everything is edited and shot in a way to show everything about the team in a positive way and make the fans feel good about the team. Of course, the Bengals are the ones paying for this, so you're not going to make a video about yourself if you're a company. The Bengals are a corporation. They're a for-profit company. This isn't a charity, right? So they're making basically a big advertisement for their company. If any company is going to make an ad for themselves, they're going to try to make themselves look as good as possible. That's only makes sense. Just like that, the Bengals are doing the same thing. For the subject matter that they had in the video, it's impossible for anyone, including a crotchety old man like me, to really criticize what they were saying or doing anywhere in the video. It's pretty much like the most surefire softball content you could have. Unless you're an insanely crazy, diehard Bengals fan, I would say you could probably save yourself about 40 minutes and skip this one. I watched it about a week ago and I honestly barely remember it. So there was really not much memorable or interesting in this entire thing to me. There were a few highlights, but most of them were just shooting fish in a barrel, softball topics, rainbows and kitty cats and chocolate bunnies. Like, if you don't like those things, like, you must be a monster. So it's kind of the same thing as like, oh, if you don't like this Bengals production, you must be some kind of an anti-Bengals fan. No, I'm not anti-Bengals. I'm just not that excited about advertising. So anyway, in this, they showed DJ Reader, the nose tackle, going back to North Carolina, where he made a contribution or a grant or donation to one of the schools to get kids school supplies, bags, pens, shoes, all the things that kids need. So again, heartwarming story, giving back to the community. You can't really hate on that. Maybe one of the only things that I actually do remember out of this From the Jungle episode was the segment they did on the NFL Fan of the Year for the Cincinnati Bengals last year. I think his name was Phil Ambrine or Ambrine or something like that. So Phil went to Kansas City for the 2022 draft, where he was going to announce the 4th round pick. And it looked like he flipped a coin up in the air to make a joke about how the Bengals were possibly going to have to flip a coin to decide where their playoff game was going to be held last year. He did this, flipped the coin up in the air, made some kind of joke about it. But what I didn't notice until this From the Jungle video was that he didn't actually flip a physical coin, which is smart. He just, mimicked it like he was flipping something up in the air and catching it. But he didn't really do that because, it's a live television program. You can't have some guy up there like flipping the coin, and then what if he drops it? Then the coin goes like rolling off the stage. The whole thing is ruined. So instead of that, very smart television producers were like, hey, no coin, just fake flip it, catch it, and then do that. Maybe that's what Joe Mixon should have done instead of like actually putting the coin inside of his glove like he did last year. But hey, Joe Mixon went all the way with it. He got the real coin on the field. I think he got a fine for that too. So maybe just use a fake coin next time. So overall, From the Jungle, hey, I'll watch the next episode. I'm going to watch every episode, of course, because I have to. I can't not watch. But it's not Hard Knocks. So I think that's about all for the Bengals. In terms of around the league, probably the biggest story is Cooper Kupp, the wide receiver for the Los Angeles Rams. He had a hamstring injury at the beginning of training camp, and he's been out, and then he came back and then immediately re-aggravated the hamstring, and now he's going to see a specialist doctor in Minnesota. He's away from the team. So it's looking like Cooper Kupp is probably going to miss at least a little bit of time to start the season. And that's one of those things, again, with any player, you don't want to re-aggravate the injury, make it worse. They could linger all the way through. The biggest thing is keeping the players healthy going into the postseason and making the postseason. So we need Joe Burrow to be healthy enough to play in the regular season all the way through and into the postseason. And at the same time, have Joe Burrow's mind and finances cleared up so that there's no risk for him financially to go out there and play and let it all hang out, let it rip. Thursday night, Kansas City, Detroit Lions are going to play each other on NBC 820. So tune in, check that out. If there's any other news, like any contracts that might be signed in the meantime before the game starts, I might do a quick episode. If nothing interesting happens this week before the game, then I'll do my typical post-game recap where I'm going to watch the game multiple times, take notes, and then go through and give you all the interesting tidbits, all the good, bad, and ugly from a player's perspective. Try to break it down beyond going just into the stats and the box scores and PFF grades and all that nonsense. I don't want to put a number grade or a letter grade on anybody. I just want to watch the games and see what happened and see who made plays that contributed to winning the game. That's really all that matters. I hope you're all excited out there. I hope you've been waiting patiently, and we've just got a little bit more to go. So hang in there with me. We're almost there. Before I go, I just want to encourage everybody to give me your feedback. Tell me what you think of the show. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, anything that I could answer on the show, talk about on the show. If you have any good messages, I can read them on the show. If they're good. If they're not good, I'm not going to read them. But send me the messages on Twitter or X at Bengal Bites. I'm on Instagram at Bengal Bites Podcast, Facebook. Give me a rating on iTunes, Google, all the stuff. But it would be interesting to get some questions, some listener feedback, just so I can have a little bit, make it feel like I'm not just talking to myself here. So all my 5 listeners out there, please send in your questions and I will try to read them on the podcast. But until then, get ready for football Thursday night and this coming Sunday, and hooray, and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.
Davis goes in motion, and he takes the handoff around the end, and then scoots outside. Makes a great cut. Leaps across the 40, at the 50-yard line. He's to the 40, at the 20. Derek Davis, all the way. Touchdown, Princeton.